Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for the next part of my one-turn playthrough of Rebel Raiders on the High Seas. Now we finished at the end of the Confederate turn and they had just finished their purchases, but I realised as soon as I switched the camera off I'd forgotten one important thing. The rebels, of course, have a capital city to recapture, so I very quickly riffled through my purchases and scrapped the blockade runners and gunboats that they had been thinking of buying, because the rebels really need to purchase that ground offensive. Now, of course, for the... hang on, what's happened to my camera? Let's see if I can get this to focus. Now, for the purposes of my ground... oh, here we go. Yay, picture's back. The purposes of this turn, that won't do them any good, but in a game that was liable to go on a few turns more, it's what a sensible rebel player would do, because if they can possibly get Richmond back out of Union hands, then that is definitely the thing to do. But be that as it may, it is now the Union player's turn, and it has been an interesting war for them so far, because after some initial setbacks, the first two turns of this trial game, which are now in the distant past for them really, were a period of great frustration where they were trying desperately to build up enough to support the blockade and develop offensives, and nothing was working. The Confederates seemed to be beating them at every turn. And then suddenly, the previous turn, the one prior to this one, everything just seemed to fall into place. Richmond fell, Island number 10 fell. The blockade is nowhere near as strong as they want it to be, but there's enough ships on station that it is beginning to prove a bit effective. And that's with a couple of sloops left over that they can use to pursue the Confederates. Now, use to pursue the Confederate raiders, I should say. Now, because of this, there's been a bit of a seismic change in the planning for how the Union is going to win this war. And the corridors of power in Washington are now humming with a new tune. The spectacular land victories have now given them the idea that the way to defeat the Confederacy quickly is not to mess with long drawn out anaconda plans and silly things like that. No, the slow starvation plan is still very much on the table, but more priority is going to be given to developing the Mississippi offensive, continued landward advance in the east, and also priority for the seizure of more Confederate ports. And to that end, at the end of the previous turn, the Union spent a lot of its resources purchasing 3 of these. Now, these are offensive markers, one of which can be used for amphibious assault. So the first 2 of these are really no-brainers, but it depends on the target. So in the case of the Western theatre, there's been a bit of a debate. Read me rolling dice to see what the higher-ups decide. The logical thing would be for Porter to continue his advance down the Mississippi. But the Union feels that time is now somewhat on their side, and they would also like Porter to quickly nip back to Cairo to pick up some newly constructed reinforcement gunboats. They entered play the previous turn. Also, while they would very much like him to press on down the Mississippi, they also don't really want to leave the Confederates too active on the other front. Forts Henry and Donelson have not been reduced, and Confederate troops are still manning batteries worryingly close to Louisville and effectively cutting Cincinnati off from the rest of the war effort. So before Memphis is taken, and the fact that the rebels have moved a whopping great ironclad in to defend the place is also a factor in their thinking. They would like Porter to backpedal and launch his offensive against Forts Henry and Donelson. So Porter's probably a bit disappointed by this. The rebels in Memphis are probably massively relieved, and those who are in Henry and Donelson are probably looking slightly worried, especially as they did not get round to moving that gunboat up in support. That was at Nashville very much as a backstop to keep an eye on Louisville as well. So really, when the Union makes its offensive here, they'll only have to worry about the forts, and the forts will not really be supported. Meanwhile, in the east, the landward offensive is even more straightforward. The Union's got choices. They can either attack Norfolk from the landward side, or they could press on and reduce the fortress at Goldsboro. Now, the more obvious target, both in terms of reducing Confederate victory points and depriving their blockade runners of another entry point, is Norfolk. The other great attraction of a landward approach is that the gunboat in Norfolk will be rendered impotent, because if it's a landward assault on an ocean port, that thing can't participate. The only defense Norfolk will have will be its gun batteries. So now equally those will pose a problem, and there'll be no Union naval element available to reduce them, but swings and roundabouts, I suppose. So the Union landward effort is going to move in from Richmond and try to take Norfolk. And lastly, we have an amphibious assault. That is going to be targeted as much as possible at something down here. Now, they're going to have a think about this one, because Union assets are quite scattered, and it's going to be quite hard to get a fleet together. But the concept they have in mind is that Admiral Foote will be assigned to the Navy yards so that he can scoop up a gunboat and a screw sloop. That will be his initial force. But the actual target of this assault is going to be... let's go for somewhere that they can actually realistically go for. Charleston. Charleston is within range. Let's go for an amphibious assault against Charleston. So in order to conduct this operation, Foote is going to take himself. Now, because he has a gunboat in his force, his movement limit is 3. But what he's going to very cunningly do is drop it off. And at the same time, he's going to scoop up some units on the way down. So taking his force, he's going to go 1, 2, 3. He's going to drop off the gunboat that he brought with him and pick up this one. 4, 5. So he's effectively hitting Charleston with the same strength he started out with. And he's also made sure that the South Atlantic blockade station is not denuded of ships. I'm just going to put a little pink counter on that so that we know that it moved. As for other Union movements this turn, they're not going to go for any, because as far as the blockade is concerned, they're happy where everyone is. They could send some sloops scurrying about trying to chase down rebel raiders, but for the moment they don't regard them as sufficiently serious a threat. The only movement they are going to make of one ship that is not really doing anything other than being a bit of a block, really. They're just going to shift this screw sloop up here to make it difficult for Confederate blockade runners to get supplies out of Bermuda. But I think that will be it for now. So it's going to be a busy turn for the Union, because they are now, they've now committed to 3 major assaults. Let's do the landward assault first. So because it's 1862, the Union rolls 2 dice in ground assault. The Confederate defense rating is 2 dice as well. So it's going to be an even roll-off, and whoever gets the higher total wins. The Confederates will get a +1 bonus because of that artillery battery they've got. And both are going to riffle through their hands to see if they can cause mischief. I'll look at the Union first. Okay, the Union gets some very good assault rerolls. They can't use this one because of that limitation. You can't use War is Cruelty in 1861 or 1862. But they can use We Cross the Ford and Willing to Fight. So they'll keep those two handy. What about the Confederates? Is there anything they can do? As it turns out, there's one important thing they can do, and that is play Mudbound. So play at the instant the Union player announces an assault across a red line, which they have done, Richmond to Norfolk. That attack does not take place, and the Union cannon pawn that was to be used in the assault is forfeited. Oh dear. So it looks like unseasonable bad weather has spared Norfolk the great blue columns of unpleasantness that were bearing down on it. That's a bit of a blow for the Union. They were hoping to shut that port down this turn. But no matter, there'll always be a future turn. Moving further down the coast, what about this assault? So the naval force is barreling in, the one that's under Admiral Foote. Let me just find something that I can play this battle out on. Because it occurs to me that I've never shown you guys how a full-on battle works, and that's really what the Union turn was for. All these assaults suit the Union strategy, but they also suit my ulterior motives of demoing how major engagements work. So what I'm going to do is clear everything off for the moment, and I'm going to mark Charleston with a battle marker. And I'm going to use this, appropriately enough. I'm going to place it very carefully down, maybe here, as a battle board, just so you can all see what I'm doing. So we've got our Confederate defenders, and we have Admiral Foote's attacking squadron. So we have a screw sloop and a gunboat moving in to take on a shore battery and a gunboat. And because it's an amphibious assault, they have troops going in too. Now, first of all, the defenders' tactics. The Confederates have choices. They can either send their gunboat out to contest the access of the Union ships in a naval action. They can move ahead of the battery so that it's not engaged. But this is a very risky proposition because that gunboat is seriously outgunned. An alternative is they could do a joint battle. They could pair their gunboats up with the battery and make the Union fight them together. That's the best option, really, because the only other choice the rebels have is to shield their gunboat behind the battery, but that means it can't contribute to the engagement. Now, doing that is useful if the naval units have a line of retreat. Say it's on the Mississippi and you want to, if you're not too sure a battle's going to go your way, the battery is almost providing cover so that your naval units can flee and form a new defense line further up. But here at Charleston, the gunboats have nowhere to go if the city falls, so they're going to fight it out. Now, looking at the chart, batteries roll 2 dice in combat. They've got 2 combat dice there. And gunboats have 1. Screw sloops have 2. So both sides bring equal firepower to this. The gunboats are the most vulnerable. They're hit and sunk on a 4, 5, or 6. The battery is the strongest, being eliminated on a roll of 6, and the screw sloop on a 5 or 6. Now, the battery has one critical weakness in that the only thing that prevents the Union amphibious assault going in is the presence of the gunboat. If the gunboat is sunk, the assault can go ahead. And so The Union are going to focus all their fire on the gunboat in the hope that they destroy it, because even if the battery survives, their troops can still storm ashore. And that really is what they want. So they're going to go for it. The Union has a quick second look at their cards to make sure there's nothing that they're missing out on using, but so far so good. The Confederates will do likewise, but no, there's nothing here that really helps them in a battle situation. So targets are declared. The battery is going to concentrate both of its shots on the screw sloop, and the Confederate gunboat's going to tackle the Union gunboat. As I've said, the Union naval assets will throw everything they have at the Confederate gunboat. So I'll just roll for the Union first, because they're all firing at the same target. Oof, that was a bit of overkill. So the gunboat will be sunk. All firing in this game is simultaneous. So the battery is going to open fire at the screw sloop. And they do not sink it. Lucky sloop. Meanwhile, the Confederate gunboat fires at its counterpart and does hit it. So this has not been a bloodless battle for the Union. So both sides lose a unit. Now, if they wish to, the Union could prolong the gun battle in the hope of getting the better of that Confederate battery, but there isn't really any point in doing so, and they might as well preserve their sloop for future operations. So I'll return the sloop to Admiral Foote's holding box. And we will now roll for the amphibious assault going in against the port that's defended by a battery. So 2 Union dice versus 2 Confederate dice. The Confederates get a +1 because of the continuing presence of the battery, so the Union better roll high. Ooh, golly, sorry, I've just lost a dice. Hang on. Well, that was dramatic. Oh dear, that's bad. The Confederates have rolled a 6, so really a 7 on their highest number, and the best the Union can do is a 2. They're just going to have another look at their cards. Oh no, unfortunately. Ah, no. Willing to fight. The Union may elect to re-roll any or all the Union assault dice. Although the problem is the Confederates have already rolled a 6. So there's nothing the Union can do to avert defeat in this assault. But it is worth making the re-roll, because the Confederates will gain victory points equal to the difference between the highest rolls. So the Union doesn't want to give them a pushover. So they'll re-roll a 5, much better. So the Union still loses the action, and Foote is forced to retreat. But it was not as bad a defeat as it could have been, and the Confederacy only gains 2 victory points, as opposed to 6. That's a slightly better outcome. But still, things are not going well for the Union, because we've had the first major action didn't happen because of bad weather and mud. The second one saw them get repulsed from Charleston. I don't feel too bad about that. That admittedly was the experience of a lot of Union naval assaults on Charleston. But how do they do on the final assault? So Porter, as per his orders, goes back to Cairo to pick up the gunboat. And then he steams down to Henry and Donelson. And if I bring my handy grey surface back, Henry and Donelson is defended by 2 batteries. You can have a maximum of 3 in any one space. And Porter is bringing a significant amount of power to this party. He's got 2 ironclads and 2 gunboats. He's also going to pull a surprise on the Confederates, and I will just punch its counter out before revealing what it is. Now, purists, I'm going to have to ask your forgiveness for this, because this is a strange thing that can happen in this game, but I can see some raised eyebrows. The Union is going to play USS Monitor to convert one of these participating ironclads into USS Monitor, and it has a special ability. According to its card, it can ignore the first hit inflicted on it during combat, which is very useful indeed. And this card stays out on the Union side until the Monitor is sunk, or at the end of the naval combat. Then it reverts to being an ordinary ironclad. So let's see how this goes. Again, they're supporting an assault, so even if they don't wipe out the batteries, the Union troops will get a chance to storm this thing. So the two ironclads are going to focus on one battery. The two gunboats are going to focus on the other one. The Confederates are going to split their fire evenly, one shot for each attacking ship. So let's do the two Union ironclads. Oh, and it's a 6, so one of those batteries will go. What about the two gunboats? No, no such luck. Good try, though. So the first battery fires back at Monitor and doesn't hurt it. They need 6s. Fires at the other generic Union ironclad. Again, nothing. The second battery has a shot for each of those gunboats. I'll roll them together. One of them is hit and sunk. Now, the Union could fight another round at this point, but again, they think the defences are sufficiently weak for the assault to go in. So they are going to make their roll, grit their teeth against the rebel +1, and they win the battle. Even with the +1, the Union troops storm in, and Forts Henry and Donelson have been secured for the Union. Well done, boys. So I will take that away. So because it's only a fort space, there would have just been a control marker placed there, and no major victory point shift will have happened, although the Confederates do lose a point or two for losing that battle. So that would have concluded the Union's turn. 2 failures and 1 success, not too bad, considering how well they did the previous turn. And from there, they would have moved straight into their build phase. So, unlike the Confederacy, the Union only needs to worry about supply in one sense, and that is if Confederate forces have cut off any of their lines of communication, which so far has not happened. In fact, it's a very difficult thing for the Confederates to achieve, to be honest. So, looking at the state of things, the Union is a bit discouraged, but not downhearted. They've hit the Confederacy hard again. The fall of Henry and Donelson has given the Confederates yet another thing to worry about, because it's another step closer to Atlanta. And it now leaves them guessing, are the Union going to come at them from both directions or one? Why this sudden shifting of strength? And it's a lovely demonstration of Union strategic flexibility. So they will be pondering the next Union move with worry. The Union, for their part, are now in the happy place where they can think about what they want to buy for the next turn. They almost certainly will be purchasing extra offensives to augment the 2 that they're entitled to every turn. And given the effectiveness of their naval units, they'll certainly be wanting to top up on gunboats. And possibly another ironclad and a few screw sloops, if they can afford it. They have 7 build points to play with this turn. So they have many options, and it's very likely, I think, that given how things are going, they're going to go for the decisive blows and seizure of territory over reinforcing the blockade as the game goes on. But I'll stop the demonstration there because the Union purchasing and building phase will not show you anything you haven't seen before. And that is a complete round with this one. You've seen the Confederates and now you've seen the Union. Next turn will be the December 1862 phase and the game will go on from there. But I just wanted to say, I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as you have the previous one, and I hope it's been an interesting demo altogether. Thank you guys very much for your interest in the series, and as always, I hugely appreciate your company. Thank you so much for your interest and your support. It's always great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you again when I do my concluding thoughts in the next video. Take care. Bye.